The first is primary research. This is the most important slide in the entire deck, okay? Slide 23. First of all, the use of other people's research is referred to as secondary research. A secondary party collected the data, analyzed the data, interpreted the data, and summarized the results, okay? If I've done the ready step, I know what any diligent person who wanted to analyze this market knows, okay? So I don't have proprietary knowledge, I do have general knowledge. The way I'm going to differentiate and make a really good product is by doing primary market research, my own. And again, think of what Formula-X was able to do to figure out what its problem was. If it had not done that primary research, there's no one in the world who would have told them they needed more than 75% of the suppliers to be successful. Okay? Nobody in the world would have known that. They had to go figure that out. And I'll give you some other examples in a minute. What we're after, think of 3 waves of interviews. You see those initial interviews, mid-stage interviews, and late-stage interviews? Okay, I've talked a couple times about that. You can do more than 3. You can do as many as you want as long as you get to, what number again? How many do you need to get to? 100. Okay, first set of interviews. You're not asking about your product. You're asking about the problem they have. Okay? If I was Steve Jobs coming up with the iPod, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is music to you? So I'd get a self-assessment, okay? I'd capture the person's age, I'd capture their education level, their income level, their gender, lots of demographic data. And then I'd ask questions like, how many hours a day do you listen to music? Where do you listen to music? Meaning home, car, office. How many music devices do you have, components do you have? How new are they? How much did you spend on them? How much music do you have? How often do you buy music? How much do you pay for the music? What's your favorite brand of component? Why is it your favorite brand of component? How often do you upgrade your music, your components? What kind of system do you have in your car? What kind of system do you have at home? What kind of system do you have at the office? I would just get to know all the demographic and sort of psychographic profile of people in the music category. Okay? I would ask a series of questions, I would ask the kind of questions that I would ask if I had something like the iPod in mind without talking about the iPod. I'd collect as much of that information as possible in the initial interviews. So when I was done with those initial interviews, and by the way, in a consumer product like this, it's okay to do electronic surveys. You get more data. It's broader based, but it does not count towards your 100. It's the base of the pyramid, but again, none of them count towards your 100. Mid-stage interviews. I'm now Steve Jobs. I went into my mad scientist laboratory. I came up with 3 different product alternatives based on what I heard. I now go back, taking those descriptions like we saw in Formula-X, and read them. Again, I do the same thing. I call a new set of people, capture all the same demographic data, probably focusing more in on the people who had higher interest or rated music as more important to them. So again, I'm successively getting closer and closer to what I think the target market is. And I'd read those 3 descriptions. And after each one, I'd say on a scale of 1 to 10, how much does this interest you? Then, for my final late-stage interviews, I would have picked the one product I'm really interested in releasing. In this case, it would have been the iPod. I would continue to refine that demographic and really find the people that continue to get closer and closer to those people who had the highest affinity for the product. I'd be more refining now. I would be talking to some analysts now about the product. I would be sort of wooing people to buy the product. I'd be trying to figure out if there were any product reviewers I could get to. and really just putting the finishing touches on what would be the product launch. So across typically 3 stages of interviews, you want to total at least 100 interviews. And again, I think by looking at that report, you saw the kinds of questions that got asked, you saw the kind of answers you got. Okay? And it does not become that hard to figure out what you need to do. Who to interview? Okay. First of all, commercial databases, not overly available in New Zealand. Okay? And Bridget is working hard on that project. So find Bridget on the way out. But I've got lots of sources for you. And commercial databases are, you can go to places like Dun & Bradstreet, hoovers.com. You can say, I want a list of all the chief financial officers in bowling alley equipment manufacturing companies with more than $10 million in revenue. They'll say, hey, there's 100 of them. Do you want to buy them? Yes or no? They're $5 a piece. Okay? So if you want to get into the US market, there's lots of ways to get that. The other thing is there are a fair number of commercial databases available in New Zealand where it'll be things like magazine subscriptions, Chief Financial Officer magazine, Chief Information Officer magazine, Building Construction magazine. And a lot of times those magazines are free if you fill out the demographic data. And then those magazines make money by you asking for the names and addresses of their subscriber and paying a fairly modest fee, usually measured in the hundreds of dollars for thousands of names kind of profile. Yes?
Do you find, is that really often the case? I mean, I struggle to see in New Zealand there'd be many magazines or databases where you could even buy the data. Is that something that's widespread around accessing it? I just think with the privacy thing at the moment, we'd really struggle to say, I'll give you $10, but I'm going to cold call all your database. I'm
sorry, say that again.
I'm just struggling to imagine that there'd be many databases out there that would just sell you. I know some people do, they tend to be the shady guys, but...
Well, no, all commercial magazines will sell you their databases. There's no question about it. You get Time magazine, they're selling your name. You get, Building Construction magazine, they are selling your name. That's where all that junk mail you get. I don't know if you get junk mail here. It's where all our junk mail comes from. So I might be a little off on the New Zealand case, but let me give you the alternatives. Trade shows, congresses, kinds of things, great sources of information. Every major vertical industry has them. Again, there'll be manufacturing trade shows, construction trade shows, technology trade shows, coffee makers and roasters trade shows, car makers trade shows, auto mechanics trade shows. And by attending those events, usually you get the slides that come with it and usually the list of attendees that participated in it. Now, a great trick if you want to get a lot of face-to-face interviews done fairly quickly is you go to the trade show where they will charge you ludicrous amounts of money to be on the trade show floor, like $20,000, $30,000, and you don't have that kind of money because you're a startup. So what you do is you pop for a nice suite in the hotel that the trade show is held at. Instead of paying $20,000 or $30,000, you pay $400 or $500 a night for one night. And you go down and you walk the trade show and you give them a little card and you invite them up to your suite where there will be beer, wine, and pizza at the end of the day and a chair to sit on. And usually they will more than gladly come up afterwards. If you've ever been to a trade show, they're kind of arduous to go to. And while they're sitting there enjoying your beer and pizza and low budget, or high budget one night hotel room and low budget pizza and beer, ask them a series of questions. Hey, we're doing analysis on the watch industry at the watch trade show. Wonder if I can ask you some questions. Okay? Very straightforward way to get pretty good information. Face-to-face interview, one-on-one. Get a small crew of people from your company to help, and a very, very time and cost effective. Bridget, do you have anything to add on the commercial database front? Okay. Now, what you're really doing here if you look at that last bullet item, it says similarity to the sales process. You're really figuring out what your sales process looks like. You're figuring out where you're going to get the prospect names, how many calls you got to get a positive response, what the demographic looks like. You know, I'm talking to bowling bowl manufacturing companies, $10 million and up, you know, in the southern hemisphere kind of stuff. And you also learn which lists are most productive, okay? Some lists are going to be far more productive at producing results than others. You know now, before you're actually shipping the product, what's going on. Okay, interviewing, interpreting the data, and analyzing the results. We looked at a report today. There's no trick to this stuff. It's pretty straightforward. Probably the hardest thing is figuring out what questions to ask, but keep the questions simple. The other thing is, I would advise, I'll talk more about in a minute on the outsourcing front, it's probably worth it to pay a statistician to take a look at your data. You call the math department at the local college, 50, 75, 100 bucks an hour. They'll push your data through some, you know, rocket scientist, statistical analyst package and tell you if there are any other trends or correlations in the data sets that you could not catch by looking at spreadsheet and graphs of the data, okay? A lot of times you'll make, you know, there can be some interesting connections made just purely at a data level. Outside firms, I think it helps if you have the budget to use an outside firm, if you have the budget. It helps get better questionnaires. It helps, we talked about conducting the interviews, making sure you're not getting biased data. It helps in crunching and analyzing the data. You saw the quality of that report I did, okay? That took, you know, that report probably represents $50,000 to $75,000 worth of cost for that 30-page report. Collect the data, analyze the data, interpret the data, present the results. And you just can't outsource the whole process, right? You need to hear what's going on. You need to hear the kind of loose threads, serendipitous talk that, that helps you figure out how to differentiate yourself. And really what you're doing here is, again, you're getting the market ready for your product. You know what the suspects look like, you know what the target audience is, you know how many there are, you know how long it takes to close. You've got some customer use and success stories. I'll talk more about using prototypes and early prototypes in the fire section. But you've got people who are familiar with the problem. As you'll see in the next section, you have some people who've been using the product. And then also, you can call press, analysts, industry pundits, and get them up to speed on what's going on as you begin to launch the product, which is the next section. Okay, a couple of examples on where to get some data. You go to allconferences.com. It's just like that last website I told you about. I want conferences in the medical industry in New Zealand in 2012. It'll show you where they are. I want construction conferences in Asia around residential properties in 2012. It'll show you which ones are available. Hoovers.com is a good source of US data. Frequently they run 2-week free subscriptions. Limited number of accesses, but you can still get some data from them. Freetrademagazines.com. Any free magazine's revenue model is selling its list. Go look at freetrademagazines.com. Find a trade magazine that's close to where your target audience is. Call them up. See how much the data costs. And again, the beauty of all these things, you type in allconferences.com on Google and all the competitors come up. So you can not only do all conferences, but you can go check out all the other people who are out there. Generalized searches, you know, just trade events and marketing lists.